Hey, what's happening? This is Myles Kennedy, and you're listening to Appetite for Distortion.
You know where you are.
This is Appetite for Distortion.
Welcome to the podcast, Appetite for Distortion, episode number 258. My name is Brando. Much anticipated interview today. Myles Kennedy, of course, from Alter Bridge / with Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators. He has a new solo album coming out. It's called The Ides of March, but it's coming out May 14th. We'll talk to him about that and so much more. Hey, Myles, how are you?
Good, Brandon. How you doing?
I am living the dream. I'm on the...
All right. Nice.
I just realized I didn't mean to name one of the albums that you've been on.
That's funny.
Where are you calling from, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm at home. I'm in Spokane, Washington.
Oh, wow. Okay. I've never been. I hope to go once this pandemic ends. I think a lot of us are going to be doing some traveling, but it's nice to see you've been busy.
Yeah, just staying busy here in my hometown, you know, just trying to stay out of trouble.
Well, I asked this to a lot of people who are like you, who have maybe like a solo career and work in other bands. Maybe it's my lazy side coming out of it. Like, don't you just want to sit back in your home and just watch Netflix? Like, I mean, it's great that it is the motivation to constantly work. Where does that come from?
I think some of it's because to me it's not really work. It's and I try and I since the solo record has been finished, I've had to learn the art of relaxing, which is really hard. It's actually a lot more challenging than I thought it would be.
I totally agree.
Yeah, right. Just staying in one place, and I feel like we've watched everything under the sun. You know. Like what series is left to binge watch? So, yeah, you know, I just feel lucky to have a creative outlet.
So, how much of because the new album, The Ides of March, congratulations. You know what? I have to ask this, even though I feel dumb asking this. Why not March 15th as a release date? As opposed to May 14th. I'm glad we get it earlier.
Exactly. I know. We were actually talking about trying to make that happen, but we couldn't. A lot of it was just making sure we had enough time to set the record up. So we figured, well, we'll put it out in May. At least the month starts with an M, like March.
Touche. Well, you know what? I'm glad that we get it early. And for me, in preparation of this interview, I was actually able to stream the record early, and it's great. It really is.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate it.
There's a lot of things, you know, listening to it that I take away. You know, first with the sliding guitar, I guess who by the way, I'm going to sprinkle in fan questions throughout this.
All right, great.
People are excited to hear from you. Because I guess it's interesting that Freddie, I don't know where Freddie's from. He asked about you covering Rod Jackson / the Snake Pit songs. And that's what through my head with the first track a little bit with slide guitar, Get Along. So I guess you don't have to answer the Snake Pit thing first, but I guess where does the slide guitar come in? You know, who influences you? And because there's a lot of different sounds in the record. That's why I want to kind of focus on certain songs that have different sounds.
Sure. As far as slide playing goes, I mean, the first person that influenced me was Bonnie Raitt. Way back when I was in a cover band and we covered one of her songs, so I had to learn how to play the slide. And that was where it started for me. And then I discovered guys like Warren Haynes and Derek Trucks and tried to learn a few licks here and there. There's a guy I actually toured with for a while. There's a band called Big Wreck up in Canada, which has an amazing frontman. His name's Ian Thornley. And he's an incredible slide player. So when we toured together, I'd pick his brain and learn a few licks. And so that was another inspiration.
Okay, nice. Because there was also a sound that I got, and I don't know if it's on purpose or not. The Ides of March, of course, the title track, I got strong Stairway vibes, especially at the beginning of the end.
At the beginning. You know, it's interesting. Somebody else brought that up, and I wasn't aware of that, but now listening, especially with that chord progression and the fact that it's an acoustic guitar, I could hear that. It definitely wasn't the intent. It was just something. I went for a walk with my wife one day and came back and picked up the guitar, and I always have ideas and musical parts and melodies floating around. So somebody just recorded real quick, didn't think anything of it, and then revisited it about a week later and liked it. But yeah, in retrospect, I could hear the similarities.
In a way, it's like the stairway of the record, because it's like 7 minutes long, something like that.
Yeah, it's a journey.
I love it. And another song that stood out. And this is going to, I guess, take a turn towards another question in genre as far as like your singing ability. Wanderlust begins. Kind of country, right? You know. Yeah,
kind of. A little bit. There's a few moments. Moonshot's another one who has a bit of a country vibe, and I love that. I love listening to country. I really love playing it. I really love playing country style guitar. There's just something about it that just excites me. But that's actually a track. That's one of the few tracks on the record. There's another song called Love Rain Down, which was not written last year. Everything else was written last year, but that track is really old. I wrote that back in, I think 2009.
Oh, wow.
And my brother really liked that song, and my wife liked it too. And I was revisiting demos, and they're like, and my wife was like, I really love that song. You should put that on this next solo record. And I was like, well, lyrically, it certainly fits. It certainly fits the context of what a lot of people were feeling. So yeah, it felt like an appropriate track to make the record.
It's good. Because right now my fiance is making me watch Nashville, that show. I think it got canceled.
Okay.
So I just have country on the brain, and it made me think, I know obviously we're focusing on the Ides of March and you have a lot of things going on, but would you ever, because I mean, Steven Tyler did it, do a country record? Is that something you aspire to do?
I think I would enjoy it. I think the question would be whether I could do it any justice. Especially the way I sing. A lot of times male country singers, they tend to be more baritones. A lot of my favorite like contemporary country guys, or I guess I don't know what you could say. Sturgill Simpson is strictly country. He's what I love about Sturgill is he mixes a lot of different things, but he has that very warm, rich, deep voice. And I'm more of a tenor. So I don't know. Maybe it would be something to consider in the future. I certainly would enjoy, going to Nashville and working with some of those really talented players. That's for sure.
Sure. I kind of hope you do, because I'm, obviously I'm a rock guy. I'm a country. It depends on the artist, but I think your style vocal can inject something in a country genre, at least to somebody who's not super into it, will make it sound different and exciting. So, but that's something
to consider. Thank you. I'll give it some thought.
All right. If you make the record, just make sure to put me in the liner notes.
All right, will do.
It was cool to find out that you mentioned Wanderlust has been sitting around since 2009. So it makes me think of a question. This is from Satya from Georgia. So when you have songs that have been around for so long and you have so many outlets, Solo, Alter Bridge, Slash, and the Conspirators. So how do you know what to bring to what table, I guess? What's for yourself, what to bring to Slash, what to bring to the boys in Alter Bridge?
Well, fortunately, they all have kind of a different vibe. So with Alter Bridge, there's definitely more of a kind of an anthemic metal. There's even metal at times. It's heavier. With Slash, it's definitely more blues-based. And so between those two, one of the things, besides the fact that they're different in that respect, is the other thing that makes it easy is like the process. So with Slash, he'll bring in the music. They'll have the riffs and the chord progression. And occasionally I'll say, hey, have you thought about taking this chord progression and putting it here instead, or add these chords here? But for the most part, he's doing that. And then my job is to put the melody and put the lyric to it. Where with Alter Bridge, Mark Tremonti and I come together with our own music parts and melodic parts, and we put the songs together that way. So it's a different process. With the solo realm, it's really a matter of trying to be, I'm doing it all. So you're kind of left to your own devices. This was an interesting record because some of the songs, a lot of the songs are plugged in, and it is more blues rock, along with the country vibe at times and the singer-songwriter element. So one could say, well, you're getting closer to some of these other projects because of the fact that it's not strictly acoustic. So that was a little bit of the challenge here, was to make sure that there was enough of a difference and there was enough of a that establishing what that part of the brand is with this record.
Okay. And by the way, forgive me because I just listened to the album, so I don't know all the ins and outs. It was Love Rain Down, that's been around since 2009, not Wanderlust.
Correct.
So
yeah, both of them. You're right, but both Wanderlust and Love Rain Down. Those two were sitting around for a long time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then you can we'll both we'll both yell at Kevin together. You're in between us, who's texting me in between. I'll see. I'll edit in an appropriate way. Oh, see, I knew something more than I did. All right, so he's corrected himself. See, I'm going to treat this podcast like live radio. That's how I enjoy doing.
Sweet, I love it.
So that makes me think of when you're doing a solo record and you had just some done. You had to do the most of it last year, and you're used to being with bands, and you mentioned Slash bringing in the music and what Mark brings to the table on Alter Bridge. When you're doing a solo record, something like this, so much you have to do last year, are you overwhelmed, or because it's like all on you, or are you excited that perhaps and I don't want to use the word limited in a different way, but we talk about the specific sounds of the other bands. So I guess, do you feel excited, like, oh, I can be, there's no limits, or I'm overwhelmed, where do I even begin? What do I do? So how do you approach it? How do you look at it?
That's a great question. It's actually excitement. It's the idea that you're left to do whatever you want to do, and you don't have to stay within a certain realm. And as much as I enjoy compromising, I think compromising is important when you're writing with people. It's also really nice to just knock down the walls and see what happens. So for me, it's really invigorating. And what I find is when I have the opportunity to make solo records, then it cleanses the palette for me, and I'm ready to go back in a situation where I can collaborate because I've gotten a lot off my chest. If I didn't have this, I might feel like, oh man, if only I could write a song that was had a bit of a, where I play lap steel and has a bit more of a Nashville vibe, or there's always the what ifs, but that's just obviously I can't do that in Alter Bridge. That's just not going to fly. So yeah, it's really, for me, it's really healthy. And at times it's overwhelming because it is a tremendous amount of work. Where it gets overwhelming is when you're in the studio, because when you're actually recording and if you're playing a multitude of instruments, then you wake up and you track guitars all day, and then you eat something quickly, and then you track in vocals at night. So it's just the days are really long, and tracking is exhausting because you have to be so much focus, But as far as creating it, the months leading up to it, I loved it. I had a blast. Right
on. Okay, cool. So that leads me to, and this is going to lead into a bunch of other questions, because I can't believe it's the 20th year of the movie Rockstar.
Right.
I can't believe it. Sorry, I have to ask because I know I don't have you here for too long. But I'm not surprised, I guess, because I got a lot of questions about the movie Rockstar. So before I get to them, this is how I see Myles as just a fan perspective. I see you a lot. And you can tell me if I'm romanticizing it or not. I see you kind of like your character in Rockstar, where you're obviously super talented and you're kind of metaphorically being pulled on stage by, let's say, Creed. And it becomes Alter Bridge, this insanely successful band. Slash is looking for a new singer, metaphorically pulls you on stage, and look how successful you guys have been. What happened with Led Zeppelin, they pull you. So are you like your character? Are you living your dream, to kind of call back the beginning of the conversation? Am I romanticizing it a little bit? Like, how do you look back on, I guess, the movie itself? And I guess what I just said, are you living the dream? Are you living what that character did?
You're absolutely right. I've actually thought about that a few times, how prophetic that movie was for my own life. It's fascinating. And then interestingly enough, with the solo projects, it's kind of like at the end of the movie when he figures out that he wants to make his solo music,
Right.
So it's all there. The difference is that I haven't had to leave the band to do so.
Right.
I can continue to do I just keep all three going. But yeah, it's really interesting. It was so much fun to make. And I had no idea what was going to happen when it was all said and done. I had no idea that the movie was going to become kind of this cult classic, that I thought it would come and go and that would be it. But 20 years later, we're still talking about it. And then you're right, to look at how some of the film mirrored where my life would end up going with playing with these heavy hitters. It's really fascinating and very, very, very interesting. So you just never know how life's going to turn out.
I know. Whenever that movie's on TV, of course, I watch it and I can see that scene and I smile just knowing, what that young actor, young singer's life would become over the next 20 years and
right.
It's just amazing. So I want to give credit to, because again, my listeners are excited as I am, Jason Alba from La Habra, California. And quickly, any cool cast stories hanging out? Anything, you see the Mark Wahlberg stage dive and miss anything silly like that?
It was a really good experience. And what's interesting is people, I was talking with somebody the other day and they're like, oh, I really enjoyed your acting in that film. I'm like, well, I really didn't feel like I was acting, because you have to look at it from where I was coming from. I was from Spokane, Washington. We're very far removed from the circles, the entertainment circles and Hollywood life. So I was asked to come down and be a part of this thing, which was a total trip. And it was, so when you see that this guy being so excited, when I have the back and forth between Mark Wahlberg's character, it's like, I don't even think that's really acting. I was just excited to be there.
Mm-hmm.
I was just geeking out. But as far as, so that leads to the answer for your question. There were times when I got to hang out and talk with Jason Bonham and talk with Zakk Wylde and Jeff Pilson and just talk music. And they were all so cool. I remember at the end of the film, Zakk Wylde brought me into his trailer and we shared a beer together, and he gave me I told him what a fan I was of his guitar playing, and he gave me a box of his, personalized guitar strings and which I still have, I still have in the basement. So little things like that were really, really great. I gave guitar lessons to Dominique. He played one of the guitar players in Steel Dragon.
Okay.
And we got to talking, and he found out that I was a guitar teacher, which I had been off and on for years. So I went in his trailer and gave him a guitar lesson, and he learned really quick. He was great. So just little things like that. I mean, it was a lot of fun.
Cool. I think it just goes down to, it's not acting. It's not work. You're just a humble guy who just likes doing what he does, and it shows. People are receptive to it. Since I only have you here for a few more minutes, I want to ask. I have so many fan questions. People are so excited. This is from Tommy Bell, and you mentioned Jason Bonham. Is there anything you can tell us? Any memories from auditioning with Led Zeppelin? Anything was it? How was it with Jimmy Page? I guess how close was that? Again, this is mirroring that movie where you're pulled on stage with this. I mean, it didn't obviously come to fruition, anything, but do you think about that now at all? Like, oh my God, did you ever wake up and be like, I was kind of rehearsing with Led Zeppelin? Or is the media kind of overblowing maybe what may or may not have happened?
Well, we did, stand in a room together and play a fair amount of those songs. I never thought of it like I was playing with Led Zeppelin. I think for me, it was always like Jason and Jimmy and John Paul Jones, and I don't think they were really sure if it was going to happen, what they would have even called it. I don't think they were going to call it Led Zeppelin, but it was definitely an incredible experience, especially considering how important that band was for me in my musical evolution. One moment that I think of often was having the opportunity to play arguably my favorite Led Zeppelin song, the Rain Song. And that was a really, really heavy moment. And that was the moment where suddenly it dawned on me what was actually happening. I'd come back, we'd done one jam session in early, I think it was like June of 2008. And then I came back again, and I think it was September after I'd done a tour with Alter Bridge. And so we reconvened in London. And during one of those rehearsals, we were playing the Rain song. And because that song is so beautiful and so haunting, but I think we got to it was like I want to say it was the second verse, or whichever verse it is where John Paul Jones comes in with the descending mellotron part. And that's when it hit me. And I literally had to pull away from the mic, and like, my eyes are welling up, and I'm goosebumps. And it was just that was the moment of realization of like, you were playing arguably your favorite song of all time with the guys who created it. And this is insane. And it's probably never going to be, no matter what you do from this point forward, it may never feel quite like this. And so I hold on to that memory dearly.
Wow. I appreciate you sharing that. And again, that's that Rockstar moment. So I have one more, I guess, Rockstar moment to ask you, non-related album before we, I get you on your way. I mean, you're right. Nothing may come close to that, but what kind of came close to it is when you were on stage, with, I guess, Guns N' Roses. If you want to, I guess you wouldn't call it Zeppelin, you wouldn't call it Guns N' Roses. So can you talk about that experience when you found out that you were going to be singing with GNR at the Hall of Fame, and, your reaction to that? Because unlike with Led Zeppelin, you were on stage for people to see. Was that hard for you to do? Was that fun? If you can talk about that a little bit.
Well, for me, it was interesting because it had been brought up, and initially, it seemed like that was the gravity of the situation was a little too hard for me to comprehend, and so when they first brought it up with me, the idea of it possibly happening, I didn't, quote unquote, jump at the chance. It was kind of like I needed to really give that a lot of thought because, there was just a really unique set of circumstances. So after I thought about it for a while, and it seemed like they really wanted to play, and I thought, well, okay, let's give this a shot. This is they're an important moment for them. So if I can help facilitate it, great. But honestly, in the back of my mind, I really did think that the entire band would show up. I thought everyone was going to be there. I thought Axl would show up at the last minute. One of the things I remember, maybe more than being on stage, was I was behind in the backstage area, and they were accepting their award and talking. And then I heard applause, and I see them start to head to grab their instruments. And I remember I kept looking at one of the doors thinking that Axl would walk in and they would perform together. I honestly thought that was going to happen.
Wow.
When I looked one last time, the door didn't open, and I remember telling myself, you're going to have to go out and do this now, so essentially don't fuck it up. So it was definitely it's weird. I don't remember much because it was such a heavy moment. I remember looking back at Steven Adler, and he was grinning from ear to ear. And that was a really special moment. And that was when I realized that though it wasn't necessarily because, like I keep saying, the gravity of the situation. It's not that I wasn't honored to be asked to help them, or be the guy that just kind of stands in and sings those songs. But seeing how happy they were really made that any stress or any quote unquote, fears or misgivings I might have had worth it. Because I was like, hey, these guys are doing what they want to do, and this is a really important day for them. Awesome. I'm glad they got to do it.
Right on. And you're right, that Steven Adler smile cures a lot of things. And right now I have a Steven Adler smile on because I'm talking to you, Myles. But before we run, I guess tell us where we can pre-order. Yeah, I have it, whatever. But where can everybody else pre-order the Ides of March, which again comes out May 14th on Palm Records, which is, it's going to have like a bunch of different versions, right? With vinyls and glow in the dark vinyls. And can you just tell us, tell us everything we're going to get when we pre-order?
Yes, my manager Tim's got all these. He puts together all these cool things and the label Napalm, and so yeah, you can go to MylesKennedy.com and check out all the vinyl and the CDs and the swag, and it's all right there for your viewing pleasure.
Amazing. Well, Myles, this has been definitely a highlight for me to speak with you today. This was my Rockstar moment. Thanks. Thank you so much, Myles. I appreciate your time. You have a great day.
You too, Brandon. It's been a pleasure.
What an awesome dude. That was so much more than I ever expected it to be. So thank you, Myles. And thanks to all of you for your great questions, for submitting and making, as always, you, the Appetite for Distortion listener, make this a better interview because of just the questions you ask and your involvement and your excitement. Your excitement is contagious, makes me excited to do these interviews. So with that in mind, let's wrap up this interview with a segment I like to call My Monologue. Monologue. So obviously I've wanted to interview Myles since day one of the podcast, but there are certain interviews, and just being a podcast in general, you have to earn your stripes. I can't just start a podcast. Nobody can just start a show and just start interviewing great people. You have to earn it. So over the years, you've been on this podcast night train ride with me and getting big names. Sometimes it's like, why can't you get that a certain name? Well, there's that landmine called Guns N' Roses that makes things difficult sometimes. And it's out of my control, that I've learned. Because like with Myles, if he didn't want to talk about, and I asked this beforehand, if he didn't want to talk about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or certain things, I would not have spoken about it. I asked his permission. And that's how it usually goes. Either, you ask ahead of time, or I'll wrap up recording and I'll say, is there anything that you didn't want to discuss? Because maybe we got into some heavy topics, and 9 times out of 10, 9.5 times out of 10, people just want to leave it. But I just want people to have the option to feel comfortable that I don't want to have any gotcha moments. We have the luxury of this. Yeah, I treat it like live radio, but it's a recorded podcast. I don't want anyone to feel trapped here. This is just a fun place to talk about Guns N' Roses and Guns N' Roses related things. So with that in mind, there are many of you that just listen to the podcast and perhaps don't check social media, Facebook.com/The AFD Show, Twitter @The AFD Show, Instagram. So I, just like with this interview with Myles, I was taking questions for Adrian. And of course, many of you want to know about, his opinion about the 1988 tour where Guns N' Roses opened up for Iron Maiden. And famously, these are known facts that it was didn't go that well, that Axl didn't like opening for Iron Maiden. I think Izzy had some issues with it too. They looked at them as, there's a lot of interviews have been done about it. It's been out in the press. So after, speaking with Adrian for a few minutes about his new project, I asked him about the 88 tour. And, his answer is pretty diplomatic, saying that he doesn't think that Axl wanted to open up for them. Not really sure why. It was a shame, but, in the end, he was very diplomatic about it, saying, it worked out for both bands, considering how successful both are. And then I guess followed up with, if he had ever had an opportunity to collaborate with Slash, which he has not. And that was basically it. Interview is over. And if you recall that episode, that interview is one of the ones that I do that's called a radio tour. And I was running that radio tour. So I was technically on the phone with Adrian Smith for 2 hours, patching him into different radio stations to interview about his new project. And I was one of those radio stations. So I'm on the phone with him for like an hour before my interview. And one of the interviewers beforehand, it's very fascinating to listen to other interviews with the same person before yours. It's quite the perspective. But somebody asks, is there anything that you don't want to talk about? And honestly, Adrian Smith said the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think he's just sick and tired of talking about it. He really doesn't have like a true opinion. So I'm not outing him on really anything. But that was like the one thing that he mentioned. So it's my turn. And I asked him about the 88 tour, and I told you his responses. The radio tour is over, 2 hours, everybody's happy. I get a call from the person I'm friendly with who helped organize the interview. schedule and said that management is asking to remove any conversations about other bands. So Guns N' Roses, I can't talk about Guns N' Roses on my Guns N' Roses podcast. I don't understand. Well, they think it might reflect poorly on Iron Maiden and Adrian Smith. It doesn't. I told you what he said. Nothing reflects poorly on them. However, I'm not the manager, but I'm also not. I'm a nice guy, but I'm not a pushover. So I said I really would like to air this. I can edit some stuff to make it maybe sound, make him sound chippier, like happier, maybe, or just tighten it up. You know what? I'll even send it you. I'll send you the file when I'm all done, just to show you like how good of a guy I am. And then I get a message back from the management that it's great, but they would be upset if the Guns N' Roses stuff aired. And their concern is about clickbait. I have no control over that. I said this with a coworker of mine, and this could be said, maybe of other managements. Sometimes it's short-sighted because yes, there are such things as bad press. If you're looking at if you follow sports, yeah, Deshaun Watson is going through some bad press right now. Okay, anything involving sexual harassment or bad press. You know what I mean? This is bad. This isn't bad. Even if it's like a clickbait where people are like, what if like it was phrased like Adrian didn't call Axl an asshole, or even if it was the most egregious clickbait. You click on the article, you read what he says, you hear what he says. If you actually click on the link of the podcast, which all of those online magazines do or supposed to do, and everything is fine. And plus, you just learned that he has a new project out called Smith Kotzen. But again, I'm not the management, so I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? Not only is this interview part of my podcast, I just ran a radio tour for him for my job, so I'm not going to put my job over the podcast. So I said, you know what? I'll take it out. And I don't want to develop a reputation of being difficult to work with. And I hope to interview Adrian again. And maybe next time will be the appropriate time to talk about Guns N' Roses. So, and that's just, again, with Adrian Smith. And just look at who I had on. Myles Kennedy. Where there could be a lot of hot button issues with the landmine that is Guns N' Roses. Just being a fan to going into this podcast. They were once the world's most dangerous band, full of controversy. But even when I don't even touch those subjects, this band is, it's hot. It's hot to the touch. And sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, sorry I touched that. I didn't realize, I didn't know that was a site. So I do my best, and it's been a wonderful ride with all of you who have helped me shape the narrative of this podcast. That I'm not a shock jock. This is not, a clickbait inducing, like purposely inducing podcast. I can't help that my interviews are popular, that do well. How people run their business, Blabbermouth, Brett at Alternative Nation. He's my friend. I consider him a friend, but he's one of the masters of clickbait. Many times I look at his articles and I guess I'm like, I shake my head, but he's been always so nice to me. He doesn't do anything evil. That's just the way of the world now. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan. I'm not a fan of clickbait either. And so that's why I do this podcast. What other people do with this podcast, I can only control so much. So very grateful for Myles to come on this podcast because I know it's, this podcast is full of controversy, apparently. So thanks for hanging out for another episode of Appetite for Distortion. Who will the next guest be? I have no idea. I don't know who I'm allowed to interview anymore. About what? But we've been making it work. Oh, yeah, we've been making it work. So stick around. Again, conversation continues on social media. That's how you can possibly co-host. That's how you can ask questions to your favorite rock stars. So until next time, when will you see the next episode? Who will the next guest be? In the words of Axl Rose concerning Chinese democracy, I don't know if soon is the word, but you'll see it.
Thanks to the lame ass security, I'm going home.